Al Nodal, you formerly were the general manager of cultural affairs for the city of Los Angeles in California. You are now in the midst of a humongous project, a publishing project of Memoria, Cuban Art of the 20th Century. How did this humongous project begin?
We started in '92, and over the years, it took over 7 years worth of research in Cuba and around the world. And then after the research was done, we set out to try to publish it, and we went through a very complex process. Complex in many ways because they're working with Cuban things, and any project that unites Cubans and Cuban Americans, and projects that are concerned with people in Cuba and the United States are very hard to make happen. So it took us quite a long time, but the results, I think, will be worth it, in that it's the single place where Cuban artists of the 20th century, not all of them, because obviously the book would be 5 times as large, but a good selection of Cuban artists of the century have been put together in a resource book and a database where people can use it in the future. And I think that's the most important part of it. It's going to be a very useful book to many people around the world. Our core team is 5 people, including myself. I consider myself more the producer of the project. And then we have Cristina Vives, who's an author, a curator, an organizer of Cuban art, who lives in Havana. Jose Vegas, who is really a very important person in terms of Cuban art, because he's got the most important archive of Cuban art of the century. Very, very large archive. He has been very much part of the project, but also provided all the information from his archive for the initial research of all the stuff that needed to be researched in Cuba. Valia Garzón, who's a curator, worked at Casa de las Americas in Havana, and now is the director of, a chief curator at CIRMA, which is a very important Latin American, Central American photography center in Antigua, Guatemala. It is the national photography organization for Guatemala. And Dennis Montes de Oca, who is also a curator and a writer from Havana. So that was the team. And it was a really interesting process, because it was really the first fruit of a group of Cubans in Cuba and a Cuban American here working together towards something really positive. It really is a good summary of the 20th century, because along with having 474 artists, and it's really the first book that's got the full biographies of all these artists, and that information alone is really helpful. It's got a chapter about what we consider the 100 most important exhibitions of Cuban art of the century around the world. It's got the first full bibliography on Cuban art that's ever been put together. It's got a very interesting chapter on the history of Cuban art, written by about 14 writers and critics of the time. Instead of us finding somebody to write the history of Cuban art, what we decided to do is try to piece together writers who have written about Cuba from the 20s to the 90s, and piece together a history of Cuban art in the words of the writers. So it's got a lot of information that would be very helpful to people who are studying Cuban art, to people who are studying these artists, to people who are interested in Latin American art overall and its relationship to Europe and to this country. So there's a lot in it that is going to be helpful. Now, we want it to just be a helpful tool for people who are thinking about art, thinking about Cuban art, are putting together exhibitions about Cuban art, and we hope this book will generate exhibitions about Cuban art. So, it's meant to be a tool. And it's also a beautiful book. It's a beautiful coffee table book about Cuba and its culture. The chapter on the critics, we decided to illustrate that chapter with beautiful photographs of Cuba itself, of the island. And the rest of it's got more than 900 color illustrations of the art as well. So got a lot of good pictures in it too. This has turned out to be unfortunately, but fortunately in many ways, it's turned out to be a sort of a self-publishing project because of the complex nature of the book and the complex nature of the relationship between Cuba and the United States. I mean, as you know, we lost two publishers in the whole process of getting to where we are today, and we're really grateful that it's being published by the California International Arts Foundation. But, you know, it's a book that's going to sell itself because it's really unique in that people need the information. There are so many people involved in this book that we just sell one to everybody who's got his name listed on that thing. We're sold out 2 or 3 times. So I'm not too worried about getting the word out about it. I know that it's going to get to the right hands. We were very, very grateful to get, first of all, support of the California International Arts Foundation, but also the Reed Foundation funded all the translation, which is very important. It was written in Spanish first, and we had to translate it all into English to get the English edition out. The Rockefeller Foundation funded the publishing of the English edition and distribution of 100 books in English in Cuba. And then the Ford Foundation is funded the publishing of the Spanish edition of the book, and also distributing 75 books in Cuba. And the Getty Trust was really the first real funder of the project, in that they invited both Jose Vegas and Cristina Vives to be Getty Scholars. This was, I think it was in 1994, to be Getty Scholars here in LA, which really gave them a chance to do the international research that needed to be happening. So it's got a lot of names attached to it, like the Getty, the Ford, the Rockefeller, the Reed Foundation, and the California International Arts Foundation. So it's got a lot of credibility.
I'd say you're very proud of this.
I'm very proud. I'm very proud to be connected to it, you know, and I'm very proud to be able to have done something positive for Cuban culture, my little piece of it. So I think it's a wonderful project, and we're on to the next one.